Welcome to the relay. We're covering today's top boxing news.
Okay, we'll start with this. Gervonta Davis' next opponent confirmed by rival trainer after his fighter was quote-unquote denied. In an interview with Mill City Boxing, Humberto Cello Betancourt, trainer of Edwin De Los Santos, revealed that the Dominican lightweight was offered the chance to fight Davis, but that the WBA champion has decided on a meeting with WBA super featherweight champion Lamont Roach Jr. instead. We were getting ready for Tank, bro, to tell you the truth. Yes, we were offered the Tank fight, but did they accept it? No, they didn't. They denied the fight. I guess they chose Lamont Roach. That's a good fight.
Not really.
It could very well be that given the current state at 135 pounds, Gervonta Davis doesn't have much to choose from right now, that Vasyl Lomachenko withdrew, Shakur Stevenson's out injured, Denis Berinchyk seems to have a fight coming up.
There are not a lot of big fights to make.
Thus, a Lamont Roach fight is just as good as any other fight that you can make right now. The disconnect.
That doesn't make it pay-per-view worthy.
That just because this is all you have to choose from right now, that doesn't mean it should cost me $90 to see it, no matter what your circumstances are. You're either putting out fights that people want to pay for, people want to see, or you're not, irrespective of your circumstances. It's not fixed.
We don't have to understand.
It's not set. We don't have to sympathize. We don't have to like what fight you think is pay-per-view worthy. Edwin De Los Santos' trainer said, "We were getting ready for Tank, bro, to tell you the truth. Yes, we were offered the Tank fight, but did they accept? No, they didn't. They denied the fight. I guess they chose Lamont Roach. That's a good fight. I ain't knocking them, but he's a 130-pounder going up to 135. Like Shakur Stevenson said, why not fight somebody that is a natural 135-pounder?
It doesn't matter.
Whether it's Edwin De Los Santos or Lamont Roach, those are not pay-per-view worthy fights just because you say so, just because you want to line your pockets.
Just because the bar has been set so low in recent years, you think you're supposed to get $90 from us every time you turn around.
A lot of those people that you see online, whether it's on Twitter or here on YouTube, the ones who vehemently defend Gervonta Davis and whoever he chooses, whoever he fights, how many of those people do you think are actually buying his fights?
How many of them do you think bought the Frank Martin fight? You hear about the piracy problem in boxing all the time.
And I don't want to spend a lot of time on the redundancy of stealing his fights while at the same time calling him the face of boxing.
Stupid.
You don't think enough of him, his ability, or his pay-per-view to buy it, then you ain't in no position to talk. You're just a thief.
What you think doesn't matter.
The point is, it could very well be that Gervonta Davis is facing a scarcity of options right now. But that scarcity doesn't justify billing this as a pay-per-view. That this is all you have to choose from.
So what?
Who cares? I like an Edwin De Los Santos fight about as much as I like a Lamont Roach fight.
And that ain't much.
Where you want between $80 and $90 for your show, we're getting better shows for way less than that from Riyadh Season. You can't justify it at this point, that even if you are backed into a corner, that's not our problem.
You had plenty of opportunities in the past
to put together fights, pay-per-view worthy fights with pay-per-view worthy opponents.
You've had plenty.
So that if you're all out of options momentarily, it's all the same to the consumer. It's all the same to the boxing fan. It's more of the same from Gervonta Davis.
Who cares?
Numbers are down. Metrics for boxing are down. Pay-per-view buys are down.
American interest in the sport of boxing is down. The only thing that's up is the piracy.
And you can't make any money off of that. So whether it's Lamont Roach or Edwin De Los Santos, it's all the same to me. It's another overinflated, overpriced pay-per-view that no one was asking for.
From a fighter that's nowhere near as good as he's made out to be.
It's out of the question that he should move up to 140 pounds. That if the options are better and more interesting at 140, then why doesn't he just go up there? He's already been at lightweight for 5 years. He's been there since 2019.
It's not like you're trying to become undisputed or anything.
Didn't Teofimo Lopez just call you out? You ain't got to fight. He ain't got to fight. Why didn't you go to him?
Lamont Roach.
What are we supposed to do now? Are we supposed to pretend that as many people know Lamont Roach as they know Teofimo Lopez? Are we supposed to pretend that as many people know Edwin De Los Santos as they know Teofimo Lopez? You could have went to him.
Keep picking these guys. Nobody gives a shit about these guys.
It's out of the question he should go back to 140. That's out of the question because of how good a boxer he is.
That's a non-starter.
Naoya Inoue is a 4-division champion already, and you literally have Gervonta Davis fans who want him to jump all the way up from 122 past 126, past 130, up to 135. That's what they expect him to do. But it's too much to ask that Gervonta just go to 140.
What, because he's too small?
Oh, he's too small for 140, but he knew he isn't too small for 135.
Double standards.
They want me and you to rate Gervonta Davis in the same spot that we rate a Terrence Crawford, or an Inoue, or an Usyk, or a Canelo. These 3 and 4 division champions.
Undisputed champions, all of them, some at multiple weights.
While making it a non-starter that Gervonta Davis leave the lightweight division. If there's nothing going on there, if it's gotten to the point that all you can do is pull up super featherweights from 130 up to 135, well, maybe you should move up.
Devin did.
Ryan did. So did Teofimo. You don't seem all that interested in Shakur. So what's keeping you at 135?
Not Shakur.
Dennis Berenchik? Is Dennis Berenchik what's keeping you at 135? What? Vasil Lomachenko in his late 30s? In his late 30s, is that what's keeping you at that weight?
Give me a break.
Move up. If the options are better at 140, then go to 140.
His fans won't ask him to because they're scared he'll lose up there.
If that's what you're afraid of, maybe he's not as good as you make him out to be. Maybe he's not cut from the same cloth as a Canelo, a Crawford, an Inoue. Those kinds of fighters, those 3 and 4 division champions.
Maybe.
But you have to be so protective of him. He's gonna stop at 2 divisions, none of which he ever unified in.
Never unified a title at 130, never unified a title at 135, much less became undisputed like some other fighters.
So go on with your Lamont Roach pay-per-view.
See if anybody buys it.
That's gonna do the same or worse numbers than the Frank Martin fight did. In men's light heavyweight news, a good bit of confusion. You may have come across unconfirmed reports that David Benavidez would be facing David Morrell in his very next fight, and that an offer has been made and they're waiting to hear back from them. BoxingScene.com even went as far as publishing a story about it, saying they spoke to a representative connected to the negotiations, but no one mentioned by name.
They maintained their anonymity, whoever they spoke to. We don't know who it is because they didn't say.
The fighters, via their social media accounts, their Instagram stories more specifically, seemed to have been hinting at something. David Benavidez said, cooking up something big for y'all for my next fight. Stay tuned. David Morrell said, ready for whatever comes. Benavidez, are you ready? Let's go, let's go.
All this
just for Michael Benson to say, told by David Benavidez, that reports of him potentially fighting David Morrell next are not true. He will be facing Jesse Hart in December.
What the hell is going on here?
Well, listen, David Benavidez, via his own social media, his own Instagram stories, he was definitely hinting at something. He says he has something big in the works, and I don't think anybody would classify a Jesse Hart fight as something big. At the very most, that's a stay busy fight. There's nothing big about that.
So how do you make it all make sense? How do you tie it all together?
I don't know. Maybe David Benavidez, when he spoke to Michael Benson, was just trying to keep a lid on things because the fight's not made yet. It's not finalized. He doesn't want people jumping the gun or being disappointed if the fight with David Morrell doesn't happen. So while they're negotiating it...
So what, this is misdirection?
It could be that behind the scenes they're working on the Morrell fight, but he didn't want anybody to know about it, so he's going to tell people, no, he's fighting Jesse Hart. That way, if he does end up fighting David Morrell, it's a pleasant surprise.
A bit too many moving parts for me.
The fact of the matter is, David Benavidez himself was hinting at something via his own Instagram stories, and I would hardly categorize a Jesse Hart fight as being anything big. Playing devil's advocate, the virtue of fighting David Morrell next instead of Jesse is the more time you give David Morrell to develop, the more difficult and dangerous that fight will become. He's 11-0 now, and you don't want to wait too long to deal with him. He already has the right base style for the job. David Benavidez's edge over David Morrell is that he has more experience, more fights, more rounds in the bank. But if you give David Morrell time,
He can catch up.
and thus the virtue of facing him next is that he's still green. He's still a lot greener than you are. You take care of this now!
So it doesn't become a problem later.
The virtue of facing David Morrell, the virtue of facing Jesse Hart, is that you need to fight somebody. You need to keep busy. Jesse's there. He's been around the block. He's been around. And you got to do something while you wait for the winner of Beterbiev versus Bivol, if you are in fact waiting for the winner of Beterbiev versus Bivol. Remember, David Benavidez is the WBC's interim champion. He's got a segue to fight the winner of that fight.
He can't let ring rust collect while he waits to challenge them.
And that's the virtue of fighting Jesse Hart. It's a keep busy fight because you need to keep busy.
Cheaper alternative to David Morrell.
Could be a cheaper alternative and an easier fight to negotiate. That's the virtue of fighting Jesse Hart.
My thoughts.
I think it would be a pleasant surprise to see David Benavidez fight David Morrell, presumably on the undercard of Gervonta Davis's next fight, since that's when they said he's coming back.
On the undercard of Gervonta Davis's next fight.
I think that fight would do more to spruce up Gervonta Davis's undercard than watching David Benavidez fight Jesse Hart. I think it would be smart of Team Benavidez to tie up these loose ends now and don't let this guy develop into a threat later on, because he might.
Yes.
I don't think either of these two guys looked good in their last fight. I don't think David Benavidez looked good with Vajdik, and I don't think David Morrell looked good with Kalajdzic.
No.
Something you want to pay attention to, though. Even though David Morrell didn't look his best with Radavalle Kalajdzic, remember, David Benavidez don't fight nothing like Radavalle Kalajdzic. So even if Kalajdzic's style was able to give David Morrell some problems, it's not really a window into what a David Benavidez fight might look like, because David don't fight like Radavalle.
Got it?
Still an intriguing fight. The edge and experience would have to go to David Benavidez. It would have to. He's got a lot more pro fights, better quality of competition, at least compared to David Morrell. He's been in there with Ronald Gavril 2 times, Anthony Durrell, Caleb Plant, Demetrius Andrade, more recently Alexander Vajdik.
Edge and experience goes to David Benavidez.
Stylistic edge would have to go to David Morrell. David Morrell has the look of a boxer-puncher. He can box when he needs to, punch when he needs to. Where David Benavidez is more the pressure guy, the pressure fighter. That stylistic matchup,
It doesn't favor the pressure fighter, where you're just trying to barrel forward, throwing punches in bunches.
the boxer-puncher will use that aggression against you. Move and punch.
David Morrell struggled with Kalajdzic because he had to go out there and try to find Kalajdzic. He wouldn't have to try to find David Benavidez.
It's not the kind of guy you have to try to find, because he'll find you. So when you say that David Morrell struggled in his last fight, and he did, remember what he struggled with, why he struggled, and whether or not David Benavidez brings those qualities to the table. He doesn't.
This is a good fight.
And what makes it a good fight is that while David Morrell might have a stylistic advantage, the edge and experience has got to go to David by and large. He's a more experienced professional than David Morrell. That matters.
I don't want to get too wound up by this story.
All swept up in a fight that may or may not happen, because according to David Benavidez via Michael Benson, it's not happening. What's happening is Jesse Hart.
Could be a bit of misdirection, or he could be telling the truth.
There's a lot here left of the imagination and a lot left to reconcile. If he's not fighting David Morrell, then what big news was he hinting at?
Who did the people at Boxing Scene talk to? Where did this story come from?
Questions that need answers. Elsewhere in the light heavyweight division, Dmitry Bivol says, Artur Beterbiev is the final step. I have to make sure the sacrifices were worth it. When Dmitry Bivol was asked what matters most, the belts or the chance to take on Artur specifically, he said, I wanted the undisputed fight first, and I wanted to fight against the best boxers in the light heavyweight division, Dmitry said. This is my goal, to make my name. He has these belts. The 39-year-old Beterbiev owns 3 of them. Bivol is the owner of the other. Between them, they've amassed 43 professional fights without a draw or defeat among them. I hope that casual fans around the world can understand the importance of this fight. Bivol's promoter, Eddie Hearn, had previously stated, it's going to be one that goes down in history. It's the best fight that can be made in boxing today, if nothing else, in the light heavyweight division, built up over approximately 7 years, I'd say, as both Dmitry and Artur became champions in the same year and reigned parallel to each other for the same amount of time.
About 7 years.
An excellent fight, and it's very hard to argue with that. It's the fight that, in effect, Bivol has always wanted. This is my goal when I came to pro boxing, to be the best in the light heavyweight division, and this is the final fight to prove myself, the 33-year-old said. What it means for me? I've been in boxing since I was 6 years old. I sacrificed so much in my life. This is the final step. Did I do everything right or not? I want to make it that I did everything right. They have a very traditional view of their profession, their job.
Being boxers?
Being champions. That is not unanimous across the board, across all divisions. Some guys win a belt, and they're not necessarily interested in getting all the belts.
Achieving that goal, that's not everybody's goal. For these two guys it is, because they have a more traditional view of what they're supposed to do, what their role is.
I think the same is true for Oleksandr Usyk. Oleksandr Usyk made it his mission to unify the cruiserweight division and subsequently the heavyweight division. And what you'll notice is that he got it done without any of the antics, without any of the shenanigans you see from fighters in the West.
Just by doing what he's supposed to do. Fight the fights, win the fights.
Without the atypical shenanigans you see in the American boxing scene, without making an ass out of himself, just being a consummate professional, readying for his fights, preparing for his fights, winning his fights, and eventually the money came.
The same is true here.
Neither Dmitry or Artur could ever be accused of being chatty patties, boisterous or brash, talkative. They really don't say much, but just by doing their job, doing what they're supposed to do, they were able to get at the bag.
The money.
The big money, the big fight.
That's refreshing.
So many try so hard to turn boxing into a circus for the sake of promotion, for the sake of marketing, in order to get the bag. Here you have two guys that did it the right way. They fought the fights. They fought the champions. Now they have to fight each other. And even though they're not big on talk,
They're big on boxing.
though the situation is not without its drawbacks for Dmitry. As he readies for battle with Artur, he's already in the midst of one with his ex-wife,
As she's trying to air out all of their dirty laundry, popping up here and there saying this and that.
making their messy divorce and their business everybody's business. Is this to distract Dmitry ahead of the most important fight of his career, or is she just trying to get at a few more dollars since he's making a few more dollars now that he's in bed with the Saudis?
She has become a lot more vocal over time.
He's a guy, he's got a lot on his plate. You got an ex-wife who's trying to defame you publicly every chance she gets, and you've got a monster that wants to pound your skull in and take your belt.
Take what you've got.
It ain't easy, and it took long enough to get to this point. For the spectator, in what is this spectator sport, what there is to appreciate is that the both of these guys are no fuss, no muss, no nonsense kind of people.
This ain't like Edgar Berlanga or Jermel Charlo just showing up to get paid, just showing up for a check. You get the sense that both of these guys, they mean business, they take each other seriously, and that'll show up in how they prepare, that will show up in how they fight. They're gonna give it their all.
Neither one of them knows how to lose. Not yet. This is very exciting, and it's the fight on the calendar that I'm looking forward to the most.